Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America. I'm your host, Don Irvine, joined by my co-host. We're a little bit late this morning, Brian McNichol.
Good morning. Hello, deplorables, dregs, despicables, chumps, Neanderthals, dog-faced pony soldiers, and semi-fascists.
All right, so we haven't done this for a while, but I had to throw this in here. The National Deviled Egg Day.
Okay, now I love the deviled eggs. You're not about to inveigh against the deviled eggs, are you? Because that would
no,
that would be real debate there.
I love deviled eggs. My mom made a lot of deviled eggs in her time, so I had a lot of them as a kid. Not as many of them as an adult because you can't find them, when my wife's not about to go make them. So, I when I saw that, I said I just had to at least throw that in there because it's a treasure that is often overlooked and people just don't give it enough credit, and you can't find it enough as far as I'm concerned.
And my sisters make great deviled eggs, so that's like one of the holiday treats. Is we have a little party on Christmas Eve, then we have Christmas dinner, and the little party they always have deviled eggs. That's the best ones I see all year.
Yes, so we were honoring the deviled egg today.
Yes, sir.
All right, a couple other quick things here. Just check in for Halloween. Do you have trick-or-treaters in your area? I can't remember.
I think you know what, we did not end up with any candy, so we were hoping none would come, and I think one kid came. I think the kid that lives across the way from us came, and we said sorry. We didn't get any tricks that I can tell, but it's not. Reston is not. It doesn't really happen a whole lot around here. Just the way the place is set up, it's not a big, it's funny because a total leftist set all this up, right? And his community togetherness and this and that and the other, and everything he did to promote it kind of works against it. So I don't know. I think the natural order of things is that we kind of like our alone time and the people close to us, and some people are more outgoing, and it doesn't, I don't think how the town is built ends up mattering much.
All right. So wait a minute. So does that mean that your kids, for the time you've been living there, really haven't done much trick-or-treating, or they go elsewhere to go trick-or-treating?
They go elsewhere. And I had a friend who had a nice little neighborhood of townhouses over in Fairfax, and they did their garages up as like little mini horror chambers or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like a competition amongst the neighbors, right? And my friend is really good at it, and so we would go walk their neighborhood and judge the costume and come back. I mean, the contest, and come back and tell him he won. So he would feel good. So we did that for a lot of years, and he does a good job. Sometimes he clearly did win, but sometimes, like one year we showed up and he said, "Oh, there's one's right over there. They're way better than me this year," and they were. So. They had fun with it. Marty went out the other night, like at 8:00, and I'm like, you should not be trick or treating. It's over. No one wants you at their door after 8:00. And he comes back with like this huge sack of stuff, So I think what happened, when he told me, he said, all these people, I was their last customer, so they're like, yeah, take all this stuff. This huge bag and he like takes it to football practice and gives it to the other players. And we've been trying to dole this candy out for 3 days now. So
that's the other, that can be the other strategy, is that people who do kind of have this candy in anticipation of trick-or-treaters are like, well, I don't really like candy that much, or I don't want that much around the house. So everybody who shows up, the last people who show up, before I close up shop, you can have most of it or all of it or whatever.
Yeah,
and
I hear you.
And things like that.
I read something about this the other day, which I thought was really good. So that they, a new study showed that the healthiest way to handle Halloween candy with your kids is to, when they get home that night, let them eat all they want, because they will eat all the candy they want for that year that night, right? And they won't really feel good. They'll say, oh, I don't really want to, right? And you sort of, you pay with one night of fun, but the kids dissuade themselves from eating candy all the time. So they're like, the idea of taking it, doling it out later and all that, forget that, just let them eat. And I don't know, but the more I think about it, I think that's a pretty good idea.
Yeah, won't matter to me. The best picture I saw so far was from a friend of mine who he he had his daughter. He took a picture of his daughter. You know, she splayed herself out on her stomach on the floor, surrounded by candy, and he just said, candy coma. And I think like, yeah, that's probably something very apt for a lot of families can empathize with. That is that, even if you purposely do that, it's a great way to just kind of put a visual to what happens on Halloween for a lot of things. But when I was looking through my Facebook timeline, when just after I had reported that we'd had 0 show up, it was interesting to see, from the other Facebook friends of mine who live in different places, just the variety. A lot of them were had very few, but there was that one person. I mean, who was it? She say her daughter? I had like 370 or some. Like, wow, where the heck does she live?
We're gonna move off that highway, man.
I was just like,
you're back in the woods a little.
I've been thinking about it ever since I saw that. Even this morning, I'm like, there's no way I would have ever bought enough candy to handle that unless this is some kind of thing that they know is going on. That it's like a huge community thing. And so everybody better be prepared with like 500 pieces of candy or more to handle it, because that's just out of this world. I was trying to think even to my childhood. I'm like, we had a very busy neighborhood when I was a kid. And, and I think when we were growing up, things seemed to be a lot busier with kids in neighborhoods than they are today in general. But, I'm sure my parents went through, 100+ pieces of the large candy bars, the ones that back then probably cost 10 cents a piece, probably, or something like that 50 years ago. Now the ones that are costing you $1. So it's interesting to see how that all has evolved over time. And as one person said, which was maybe one of the better comments, is that they're having dogs, not children, which is, the birth rate has definitely gone down.
On that topic too, though, it's like you think you're getting away with something there, right? With the people when they have the dogs. Scott Adams, he has some interesting stuff to say from time to time. He tweeted out the other day, he got a lot of flack off of this. He said, if you young unmarried people, if you have a dog, it reduces your prospects in life and what you can do from day to day by 30 to 40%, which I think that's true, right? You have to go home and feed them. You can't do anything after work. You're sort of, tied to this thing that you have to go do all the time. That's not even, it's not even a kid. Doesn't even talk to you.
Just barks or whatever. That's the thing. I mean, look, nothing against pets. If you want to have a pet, pets have been great companions for people. There's no doubt about it. But pets are work. Right. For, particularly dogs that you've got to go walk them, frequently and things like that. And, there was a guy at the gym this morning and he was leaving. He said, I guess he works a night shift. So he had told the guy at the desk, he said, says he hadn't had breakfast. So he came home, took a shower, walked the dog, came to the gym, and now is going home and going to go eat.
Wow.
So maybe the time he walked the dog, he could have fed himself, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it starts replacing your life,
Well, yeah, and it's a huge expense. I mean, I just have a hard time. I mean, I just remember growing up and people had pets, but if your pet got sick, chances are you probably euthanized the pet or whatever. And just took care of it this way. People will spend a lot of money to save their pets, and the x-rays, everything. I mean, the amount of money people spend on their pets at the vet's office is unbelievable.
It's expensive. There's not a lot of them, they're pounded with work. But it's like, I don't know if this is still true, but when I left Louisiana, there were 34 spots a year in college for vets. In the whole state, there were 34 places. You had to be one of the top 34 people to go to school, the veterinary school. So there's a few, it's obviously a little bigger now, but it's hard to get into, and it's not that remunerative compared to other fields of medical studies. So, it's a tough sled.
Yeah. You go into that, because you love animals and things like that, not because you're thinking you're going to make the big bucks like the surgeons do or something like that. So my other question here was that we're going to have some good weather. Are you going to hit the links?
I'm trying to. It's a lot to do, but when I get my little 10 minutes, I try to run over there. But yeah, it's great. This is one of the best times of year to golf.
No, I mean, I'm going to, we're getting a nice warm spell here, and it's like, all right, this is a chance to get that last minute yard work in. That, well, I mean, I have to get rid of the leaves one way or the other, but I've got to give the grass one more cut, but I've got to get the leaves off the lawn before I cut them all. There's just too many leaves.
Hey, I love the socialism in Reston for that purpose. They're on the leaf problem. There are leaf guys out every day making the leaf thing go away.
I mean, I could make my life a lot easier. I could take my leaf blower and I could take the leaves at the one end of my property and I could blow them all to the other end of the property and put them into basically the common area where the landscaper that's hired to take care of that area, and then let them haul the leaves away, in a couple of weeks. But I always feel that pang of guilt, that I might throw some in there, but I just can't. There's a lot, not that they would say anything necessarily, but you know the types of leaves that fall off the trees that are in that front of the house. They're different than the leaves that fall off the trees in the back of my house because I got a lot of oak trees back there with these leaves that are humongous. Yeah. So somebody would say,
we had a sycamore tree growing up. Those are the worst leaves. They're big and like they get stuck on the rake, so you got to keep pulling them off the rake.
Yeah, I mean, I'm grateful for the leaf blower, but I've just been struggling in terms of how many of these leaves should I blow into the back lot area, because I went through that period of time where they just kind of piled up so much that I paid somebody to kind of clean up that area anyway, versus bagging them, which is a pain in the neck too. But I think I'm trying a little experiment, just periodically going through there, blowing some together, throwing some in the bag, throwing some in the back, and trying to push them as far back as I can so that they're kind of off my property, but into this other area, which may be the other guy's property. I don't know, but I won't care if I can get it blown over.
I gotcha.
It's one of those things. Who knows? I don't know. I don't want to get into fights with my neighbors, but if I try to do it somewhat surreptitiously, maybe I get away with it overall. All right. Ukraine. I don't know. Things are still happening there, I guess. Day 252. We're just kind of that long slog. I did see an article, though, that as the Russians have pulled back in some areas, it's kind of exposed the collaborators, which has created a whole nother interesting issue for Ukraine. For those, but I don't know. I mean, I think I guess some of the collaborators just thought Russia had come in here and they had no defenses and they were going to wind up living under Russian rule. What was our choice? On the other hand, there are other people that says, how can you go against the motherland in terms of Ukraine? You turncoats and things like that. So I hadn't even really thought about that issue. I don't know if that's a big or long-term problem for Ukraine in terms of trying to root out collaborators and any sympathizers that they may have still in Ukraine, even after they recapture their territory.
There's also the generals are talking. There's been some talk about whether to use nukes. There's been some talk about what Russia after Putin, which is interesting topic, and it's coming faster than we probably think. But he's not assured of being there forever. It's sort of grinding to a stalemate. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the winter. Do they try to fight in the winter? If not, we're kind of holding at a holding pattern where Ukraine controls most of Ukraine, and the Russians are there, right? So there's a renewed call for there's time for them to sit down at the table. It's like Russia, get out of the country, and then we can talk about sitting down at the table, right? Would you just attack somebody for no reason? It's completely unjustifiable. You don't get to just take people's land. I mean, that's why we fought in Kuwait. That's why we fought a lot of things in Grenada, all over the world, where we just said, you're not going to take over a country. You're not going to hostily conquer a country.
That's right. All right. Now, the big thing coming up here is that, what is today now? November 2nd? They've got 6 days. 6 days. Until the midterm elections. Now, once again, to couch that like I've tried to in the past, which is just that we do have a lot of early voting. We've had a lot of mail-in voting. But there'll still be a significant amount of in-person voting coming on election day. There's no doubt about that'll happen. So there's still people that can be swayed and influenced here in the next 6 days. And the airwaves are, just chock full of ads. I mean, if when I at the gym, it seems to be that I guess the local stations, what the thing is that all the ads that they have to run or whatever, they basically put them into a block. So I'll see the pro Spanberger ad and maybe the anti Spanberger ad, and then the Wexton pro Wexton and anti Wexton or something like that. There seems to be a lot of concentration in Virginia. Really don't see a few Trone ads and a few Parrot ads for Maryland. But I haven't seen. I really haven't seen much on the Cox Moore racing for here in Maryland, but so we see some of those things going on there, but it's interesting because it just seems that Republicans definitely look like they were going to run the table pretty much months and months and months ago. Then that seemed to tilt back a little bit, I mean, and those things, you always have those swings that come and go, and it looks like right now Republicans have regained the momentum. And they're looking to set themselves up pretty well. The Senate, I think it depends upon which poll you're reading or polls you're reading and how that's going. It's just sometimes it's hard to figure with early voting and mail-in voting exactly how much the influence that has versus versus election day. But it doesn't just seem, and we've talked about this before, it doesn't seem that the Democrats have done a lot to really help themselves on the Senate side. And the House side just seems to be just tailing away from them badly.
I am one of the more bearish people probably at this point on our side. I think that it would be kind of hard. They'd really have to slice the dice just right for Republicans not to take the House. Senate is another matter. It looks like there are a number of states where the Republican was way behind and has come all the way back to make it close, but they're not ahead. Blake Masters is not ahead. Herschel is maybe tied, right, at best. The guy in New Hampshire is not ahead. Kari Lake has not moved up 1 point in the last 2 months, right? She's about 2-point lead then, about a 2-point lead now. That's, in Arizona, which is a cheat state, right? That's a very precarious margin. And it doesn't seem like, her ceiling is much higher than where she is right now. Maybe Hobbs, that's not the case, right? I don't know. I see all these things like I worked for Tom Davis. One of the things he was insistent upon was that right direction, wrong track was the number to watch to tell how elections were going to go. And now Wall Street Journal was out Sunday with a national poll, like I think 4,000 likely voters. So it's a good sized poll saying that right direction was 9 and wrong track was 74. So if you're 65 points underwater in right direction, wrong track, that's a bad number, bad place to be for Democrats. But their pollsters, their people say that, if you're looking at early voting data, that's coming down on their side. Now, I saw something this morning that said that Georgia is ahead of 2020 pace on early voting, absentee voting, right? So, but I've also seen things that say that that's because Republican areas are voting more early in absentee, that they're becoming more comfortable with it, and that it's not a bad sign for Herschel. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's going to be a very close and interesting night. And I think that, instead of a nationwide cheat, you will have a very focused, right, telescopic type of cheat going that you will have to worry about. Whether they actually do it or try to do it remains to be seen. But, they're not, it won't be a broad thing like they had to do with Biden. It'll be just in a very few areas. House, it doesn't look like. I think that I think there's enough now in the safe Republican column amongst most of these polling groups that the House, they can't mess up the House, that they're going to take the House. So we'll see. But if you are, whatever side you're on, if you want your side to win, you should definitely go vote because it's going to be close.
Yeah, I mean, I can see the Republicans maybe getting what, 20 or 30 seat majority when it's all said and done, or something in that range.
Yeah.
As far as the Senate goes, I mean, I see it going, plus or minus, one or so in either direction. I mean, it could be 51 Democrats, it could be 51 Republicans. These races are just
53 or 4 Democrats or Republicans.
Yeah, it could be.
The possible outcomes, the reasonable to expect outcomes are wide, right? It's a big difference in what it could be.
Yeah, it's really hard to say, because I'm still, the polls are what all we have, or the main thing that people rely on to kind of get the the check the weather, the temperature, whatever, for how the elections are going. But the polling has not been great in the last few election cycles, so it's kind of like, are they going to be on target this time? Are they going to be off target like they've been in the recent past? Are we going, because are people answering the poll questions,
right.
honestly and accurately?
That the Trump voters will not talk to pollsters, so you don't really get what they're thinking or saying. You have they're I guess people are making the charge that there's flooding the zone with pro Republican polls. The Republican pollsters are outraged about that and pointing out that we were more accurate last time than you were. So, there's the polling people are having their own little war over here on the side that with the rest of us don't have to be concerned about, but they're very angry with each other about how they're doing it. The other thing is on the topic of polling is that, Joe Biden is not sinking, right? We all have this thing that Joe Biden is, he's going to drag them all down and all this. And there's Ipsos polls and so forth saying that, he's down in the 30s and so forth. Okay. We talked about this before. I follow Rasmussen because it's the same poll by the same people every day. Right. And so you're getting, it may be wrong on one day or the other, but you can see the trends. And the trends are, Biden got up to about 45 about a week and a half ago, and he's been either 45, 44, or yesterday 46 every day since then. So Biden's support is not collapsing. We're over here thinking that everybody hates him. They do not hate him. His side, they're getting the legislation they want. And you see they've developed this line where they're like, well, I'm willing to pay a little extra for gas to save democracy, and all this kind of stuff. So, I mean, they're taking on the economic arguments. They're taking on what it would take not to defend, Senate candidates or whatever, but to defend Biden's administration and the work it's done specifically. So, as he looks at like what happens after the midterms, everybody assumes if Republicans take one and certainly both houses, there's no way he can run in 2024. That's not necessarily true. And I don't think that they are in the White House, especially reading what was in the Washington Post this morning about this. They're not planning on that, a bad midterm knocking them out. So, it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I mean, the midterms, the party in power generally loses a seat in the House anyway. So, I mean, it's it's pretty consistent historically for that to happen. So you're not going to look at your presidential hopes, for 2024 based on this, because you lose seats. Almost every president loses seats, with party in power, like, during that midterm. So as a result of that, that's nothing unusual. I mean, Biden has other issues in terms of, his fitness and capacity. That's right. That'll be more determinant of whether or not he runs in 2024, I think, than anything else. But yeah, it's, I don't know. I mean, it's just one of those things here where we've got, I'm kind of curious to see, we don't get as much ticket splitting as we used to with a lot of things, and ticket splitting normally is in a presidential race. But it's possible that in Georgia you can have Kemp getting a vote, and there could be a Kemp Warnock split instead of a Kemp, instead of having straight ticket of Kemp Walker. Who knows?
I think you'll see. I think that's there was talk of that. There were Stacey Abrams. Georgia Democrats were kind of selling that notion, but I think that I think the profile of that voter is squeezing down pretty small.
I mean, I think Kemp should cruise in, because Abrams, if nothing else, this time around has proven herself to be a horrible candidate.
Yeah, she really has. And I think all the Republican governors that are in trouble are in pretty good shape. DeSantis is in good shape. Abbott is in good shape in Texas. I don't think he will lose. Kristi Noem was in good shape. It was close for a while, but I think she's sort of
and I was a little concerned about the whole Mike Lee, Evan McMullin thing, but it looks like that's okay. Utah was it was just not really transparent enough to see exactly what's going on there, because McMullin is not, he's not a registered Democrat. He's a registered independent, and the Democrats just gave him their endorsement, in this weird thing that they did. So the Democrats have been pouring all kinds of money in there trying to get, pump up the vote for McMullin. But, true Democrat voters are kind of like, yeah, but he's really not. He's not even going to caucus with the Democrats, so he's not really a Democrat. And this is more of an anti-Mike Lee movement than anything else. And other things.
And Mike Lee made the point of, hey, do you want to elect a Democrat? Right? And they're like, well, we might be mad at you, Mike, but we're not that mad. So I think,
I don't think McMullin has done anything that shows that he would be a great senator, a great politician overall. It's been kind of the angry guy railing against things. That's how he's kind of on the outsider or whatever. But the more he runs, I mean, he's like Abrams. I feel like even with Beto, it's like, okay, how many times can you run for these offices before your career is over? At this point in time, I mean, the failures. I mean, Beto's not. These people are going. They're going to fall on their
Atlantic face. Had something about it. They were beautiful losers or something. It called them. It's like the Democrats fall for these people. They're like, oh, he looks so great up there, but it's not. It's an empty suit. You're in Texas talking about grabbing guns. No, that's not going to win, right? So. I don't know. I don't know how many more chances Beto gets, because it's really not looking good for him this time. Yeah, Robert Francis, that's right. Counselor, school board. Well, school board is kind of out. He may want to think about mayor or city council, because their school policy. That's one thing. The other big, the two things that give me pause. I told you the right direction, wrong track. The other one is, according to Wall Street Journal on Sunday, suburban women have moved from 11 points in favor of Democrats to 15 points in favor of Republicans. If that's true, and I'm skeptical, then it is a blowout, right? It could be 53 or 4, maybe even 55 if it's a big enough. You could get Smiley in Washington State. You're making the Democrats spend a lot of money on Patty Murray, which they don't, normally want to do. And you could start talking about really making some deep cuts into it. You could get Oz over the finish line. Oz might get Mastriano over the finish line. It could get really exciting for Republicans if that happened.
Yeah, I mean that's the other part of it too, is that the potential, erosion of the Democrat base. If the women, if that is true with the women, but also the Hispanics. I mean, we definitely see a shift in Hispanics more towards Republican candidates.
Dramatic shift.
Yeah, and that's not good news for the Democrats at all. I mean, that they have been really counting heavily on that. And that could hurt them in South Texas and other areas, where they thought they had these fortresses of sorts, and now they may see Republicans come in there and just take all these seats away. So
Nevada too, both the Senate and governor race, the Republicans have majority of Hispanics supporting them. So
yeah,
there's a margin of error, a margin of victory in the race right now.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely hope there, and that would be nice to see some shift back that way. So we'll have to wait and see. It'll be these last few days. I'm sure we'll continue to get barrage with things, ads and other accusations. But you had mentioned a little bit just before too about standing up on the gas prices. I mean, we have Biden out there. I mean, part of his campaign message, right, is now is this. The big oil, they're war profiteers. And, I was in there like, war profiteers? What is this?
Why didn't they profiteer under Trump? That's what I want to know. Like, explain to me why the the oil companies got greedy when Biden became president, right? He's ready to invest in their whole agenda, right? Because they're all trying to do something green, right? With ExxonMobil, they're doing green stuff. Chevron, BP, Shell, they're all doing big, they all have green divisions and they're trying to figure this out, right? But you're going to attack them like that. It's like, they had a Democrat, I think it was in the Post, maybe, didn't want his name used, anonymous quote, said that whoever's running energy policy over there should be sued for malpractice, right? And that's right. I mean, you can't, first of all, I believe this one does require some congressional action, right? If you're going to jack up taxes on oil companies, right? Second of all, how does jacking up taxes on oil companies bring the price down? I mean, what do oil companies or any other company do when you raise their taxes, right? They raise the price, right? They don't just, we'll just be, 40% less profitable this year because Joe Biden passed a tax on us. They pass it along to the consumers. So, if you're going to save us by raising the price of gas, save us from high gas prices by raising the price of gas, it might be better to just leave it alone, right? It might be just better. And the other one they keep saying in the election deal is, Republicans, they don't have a plan to fix any of this. It's like, revert to Trump's policies. They worked. There's your plan, right? Supply, American Jobs and Tax Act, right? Get rid of regulation. Get rid of, quit stopping domestic energy production, right? Get out of the way of it. Then you will see prices go down. People go back to work. Inflation cool. It's not that hard. There's a reason that it worked when Trump was doing it, and it doesn't work now.
Yeah, I mean, ask Californians about regulation and things like that and how it works for their gas prices, because we might be paying $3.50, $3.60 or whatever here, but Californians are still paying what, $5, $6, largely due to a lot of the regulation that goes on in California, all the things that they have to jump through. But on the tax side, this windfall profits tax, the last time we had that was during the Carter years. And one of the results of that was that it actually, drove down exploration by the oil companies.
Right.
So
makes it worse.
Yeah, I don't understand with whoever is advising Biden or whoever is in the administration that is running this thing. Maybe it is the energy people itself, in terms of you increase taxes, you're not incentivizing them to do anything to help
do anything more efficiently at all,
and create more, and get more gas into the system at all. I mean, it's just a crazy notion as to what they're doing there. But obviously, big oil, with these profits been flowing, they're a huge target. But there's a lot of different elements that run into this with, they go through a period of refining profits and all the things. They've also had during the pandemic, they lost a lot of money. I mean, demand dried up, and they have a lot of
down. Yeah.
So it's not like the Democrats take any sympathy on the oil companies when they're in, they're having their problems. They only when they've turned around and start making back the money and that they have lost over previous years. Oh no, wait a minute, that you're making too much money. You can't give that back to your investors. You've actually got to push this so you can lower the price at the pump. But the oil companies, I mean, it's based on what? I mean, I didn't realize that the oil companies are driving, the oil market itself, in terms of how the trading market, right? It's just, there's so many things here that I just don't think the administration, these people in there, understand this. It's just, they're just a good, boogeyman for them to pick on. It sounds
like you're doing something, you're not doing anything. You're not addressing the problem at all. You're adding problems onto what you have.
Right. Well, I don't know if you've seen this referendum in California that they're trying to pass about, one of the things is to increase the income taxes on billionaires, right? And so now it would now easily jump to being the highest in the country. And the result of that would be the idea would be that the money that comes out of that would then go to help, pay for, more electrification, more EVs in California. Lyft is behind that because part of the law that's out there, I guess, is that even the ride sharing companies have to have 80-90% of their fleet be EVs in the next, I don't know, 20 years or whatever it is, 10, 20 years. And for them, hey, look, if it's tax money that'll help subsidize that'll do that, we're all for that. So they poured in hundreds of millions of dollars to tell the voters, yeah, vote for this thing. But what's going to happen to all those people that have earned a lot of money, that make a lot of money? Are they going to be staying in California, with these taxes like this? No, they're going to leave, and so California is already having, a problem with keeping people in the state. They're shrinking. And this is not going to help it. But Gavin Newsom and company, they don't seem to understand how things work. And he's, here's a guy who wants to be president of the United States someday, but he's governing a state that is shrinking, that's reeling from a lot of different things.
I don't see he's somebody like his record as governor who's going to disqualify him from being president.
They gave everybody, they took in so much money with all all the taxes and everything. They gave everybody $1,050 this year, right, very nicely, to make sure it's timed also, during election season. Keep those Democrats in office. We'll keep giving you money.
Out of my face. Let me keep my money.
Oh, it's I mean? How about you just adjust the policy so you wouldn't have to be doing that in the first place? It's like, that's right. You're obviously overtaxing us at this point. Right. And everything. What about, I love Liz Cheney. She's a Republican. She says, I don't know if I could really vote Democrat, but she's out there endorsing, Democrats right and left now and things like that.
In Michigan, and she went somewhere else, right?
Yeah. I mean, she's doing multiple candidates apparently, and just like raising money for them, right? So
and raising money and giving them money. So I thought that she would have a possibility of coming back as a Republican congressperson from around here. She grew up in Northern Virginia.
That's right. That's right. You mentioned that. Yeah.
Yeah. So 8 and 11 are held by, complete leftists, extremists. So you could come in and just say, I'll just be a moderate, like a Tom Davis model Republican. And, this is what you liked before. You could like it again. A lot of people around here know her family and so forth. But I mean, if you're doing this, I don't know how you get back in, right? She may have made her choice that's not how she's going to do it. So, is she more aligned ideologically with them now, or is she really ready to blow up her family name, her career, everything because of her irrational hatred of Donald Trump?
Yeah, I don't see any path for her coming back as a Republican elected official,
not now.
Not after
magic. That's the unforgivable sin there. You start trying to help them win elections.
Or as Bob says.
Yeah.
Which
right. Is lights out for Liz.
Yeah. I did want to ask you too about this. I mean, I mentioned Stacey Abrams before, but when I saw it this morning, she made this comment in a speech. It's like she talked about the good old boys club, and really,
she said they just want to take black people off the streets. Right, all the cops in Georgia. She just said,
right.
Yeah, the cops in Georgia, they just want to take black people off the street. That is one of the more like electorally tone deaf things I've ever heard anybody say. I mean, you don't have to be pro cop, right? In her situation, she's a leftist, and she's running in she's counting on support from a big major metropolitan area, right? But to slag every cop in Georgia, a week before election day, and say that you basically see law and order as wholly a Klan enterprise. I mean, why should anyone vote for that? I mean, that's unbelievable. So I don't know. And I think the good part about this to me is that we'll see about this ticket splitting business. But when she says things like this, she's driving people in the arms of Brian Kemp, and I can see them just saying, these people are all like this about crime, and they are, right? They don't really care about crime. They don't, Kathy Hochul in New York, another Democrat who could go down. She's like, why does this bother you so much? And I'm like, well, and then Lee Zeldin, Lee's got his lines, right? He writes a speech and he's given that speech no matter what else happens. And he doesn't stop and say, oh, she just said, why do I care about criminals? She just said that right next to me in a debate. And he just kind of let it go on by. And I mean, that was one like, well, the reason is, in his case, well, my daughters are sitting at the table doing their homework and bullets start whizzing by their head, right? That's why I care, and a lot of New Yorkers have had that experience. So I don't know. There's some tone deafness over there that may cost them races they wouldn't have lost.
Yeah, I mean, Hochul apparently, I guess she's trying to run a little bit more on the crime thing, or at least trying to talk about it a little bit more now, realizing it's like, oh, I really goofed that up.
Yeah, they're already talking about they talk only to each other, right? So they're what are their big issues? Abortion, which is down to about 4% issue, right? About 4% of the voters are going to decide who to vote for based on abortion, and almost half of them are going to decide to vote Republican based on abortion, right? So you're preaching to 2.3% of the electorate there. And global warming, which I think people are slowly coming to the conclusion that it's not the threat we've been told it was.
Yeah, and people, I mean, people are, they do look at their pocketbook. They look at inflation and things like that. I mean, Biden's trying to deflect that with the jobs numbers. I mean, he has talked, as you mentioned earlier, he says, Republicans don't have a plan, and then he says, they want to get rid of Medicare and Social Security, and so the kind of the same club.
Where was the plan that says that? If they don't have a plan, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I think it was this morning. I think Clorox. I think they announced that they're going to raise prices for like the 4th time this year. This is not going any. Prices are not going down anytime soon. No. And this is a continuing problem for the Biden administration, for the Democrats.
When we're down to 20 days left of diesel. Diesel pretty much equal home heating oil. Right. So it's about it's nice here on the East Coast now. We were talking about golf and everything. It'll be pretty soon. We'll be the days that no one plays golf. Right. And because it's too cold. And if you don't have home heating oil, you're going to have a pretty populous corner of the country extremely angry at you. Right. And, diesel is already $6-7 a gallon. So, when it runs out, which it appears to be on the way to doing, you start getting, you talk about supply chain upheaval and so forth, people have no idea. And it's all because they just don't want to refine it. They just don't want to, we're going to get away from fossil fuels. We're not going to get away from them yet, buddy.
Yeah. I mean, the thing too, I mean, Biden, he has a war on fossil fuels, but now he's going on against these war profiteering, and he says we have got to get them to drill and basically explore more, produce more oil. It's like, but you've been your whole tack has been against that. You want to get rid of them. You're not giving the oil companies any confidence that they should sink any money into this enterprise. So he's so two-faced on this. It's just
it's laughable. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, and I need to go back. I need to go and read up on something I want to do in terms of the this whole energy policy about how he wants heat pumps, everybody to have a heat pump, and I meant to look for this because I wanted to find out what the strategy was in New England, because it won't work in New England. It's like heat pumps are fine if you have mild climate because it's taking the air outside and using that. But when you get to below 40 degrees, which it often happens in New England,
pretty much several months in New England.
Yeah. At that point in time, as it goes below 40, it doesn't operate efficiently. You get no benefit. You're not going to get the heat you need. So heat pumps do not work in all 50 states. Right. So I wanted to go and see what he was doing about that, because once again, they try to sell you this thing like, we're going to be more energy efficient. We're going to use electric and all this stuff. But it's like all these different things, all the EVs and everything. There's things that we're not ready for this yet. We're just, combustible, internal combustion engines need to stick around for a while. Our gas heat needs to stick around. Our diesel, that home heating oil, serves a certain part of the country, and that's the way it works. You can't just take all that out and say, this is the one thing, this is the one way we're going to do everything.
Right. That's right.
The Pelosi attack, Paul Pelosi was attacked. Lots of back and forth from both sides. I mean, obviously it was a horrific attack, but this guy is not what some people said he was at the beginning, was he?
Yeah. Well, they want him. That's another one. Democrats talk in circles. They're like, don't jump to conclusions about this. You guys jump to conclusions about this. But we jumped to the conclusion that he's a complete MAGA Trump fan and attacked Pelosi for that reason. Okay. The guy keeps talking, right? He gives a new statement every 10 minutes. And the new statement, each one, first of all, he just wanted to talk to Nancy. Then he wanted to bust her kneecaps. Then he wanted to kidnap her. Then he wanted to kill her and a bunch of other politicians. These are successive statements this guy has given. So, either he's a nutbag or the cops are cooking this to make it look like, oh, right wing, this and that and the other. The guy lived in a commune. He has BLM and whatever the other liberal thing, green crap in front of his house. He's complete, typical San Francisco leftist guy, and he is a drug addict, and he's in the country illegally. He's an illegal alien. Long-time visa overstay. He has a bunch of convictions of stuff, and they've let him out, not ever taken care of it. Right. So it's all a lot of Democrat sins coming home to roost there. And the guy's nuts. And, we're never really going to know what happened because, it's the Pelosi's, and it's probably a little bit embarrassing to them.
And where was the security?
Right. Yeah. Who let the cops in? Right. Because they keep saying the door was open and the cops were able to come in. Right. Well, who opened the door? Right. Because it wasn't Pelosi. It wasn't the attacker. It was some third person. So if there's a third person there, right. And also the hammer attack occurred in front of the cops. Right. But he didn't hit Pelosi with the hammer until the cops were there. Right. It's not like they showed up and, oh, Pelosi's got this big bump on his head. No. Yeah. Yeah. That's right. It's not a far right extremist. It's they tell you don't jump to conclusions, and they have jumped to this huge lie conclusion that they, so they can do all their right wing violence nonsense that they like to do.
It's amazing. All right. We'll go next to this affirmative action admissions deal with the Supreme Court. So they heard a couple of cases. I guess it was North Carolina and Harvard. Mm-hmm. They heard a lot of testimony from that. I think there was a report that our newest justice got into a little bit of she had some very strong words about this, her opinion that about some of this stuff too. It's interesting because I guess if you could take an early read, you'd say probably the court will probably rule against the schools, right? And to do away with all of this. I mean, we go back to, what was it, 1978 in the Bakke case, and all of this. And, but I think there was a report too, where something about where even was Sandra Day O'Connor, they were worried about how long this kind of a thing would be in effect, right?
Right. They said 25 years. We're way past 25 years.
Yeah.
Right. And they're like, well, what is it trying to accomplish? If there was probably a time when you could make the case for this, right? The people who were in the pipeline of K-12 when, before segregation ended, like when I started the schools were still segregated. You could say, okay, the black students at that time did have some disadvantages that would, make them score worse on college entrance tests and so forth. So you can kind of make the case for that at that time, but we're way past that now. So, if Baltimore, for instance, where the average GPA in Baltimore is 1.3, right, in Baltimore City high schools, okay, if Baltimore wants to get more people into Harvard, Baltimore has a problem to fix. It's not court's problem. It's not the admissions program at Harvard. It's Baltimore. They need to fix their schools, right? That's it. You can get into Harvard or wherever you want to go if you are properly educated. So, I'm never for, I think that, if you want us to stop being a racist society, stop measuring things by race, stop making things depend on race, right? If you keep saying that's what this depends on, that's what it will keep depending on. So, and I think that's kind of what the court is coming to, is like, you guys have, some of the questioning was, when will this ever end? What will be, we have accomplished the goal that we set out with this, or do we just keep discriminating forever? So, I think if they're going to put a head to it, I wouldn't be surprised if this decision is leaked, right? If there's some indication of how the vote's going to go between now and next Tuesday, I bet you hear about it. In the same way we heard about the Dobbs decision.
Yeah, I mean, I think that
you're leaking, you leak, right? Before we didn't leak, now we leak, so we just leak.
Yeah, and so that this will be an interesting thing. I mean, obviously the liberal left will cry and scream and everything about this, but it's been in effect for 44 years. I mean, really, I mean, is this really necessary? I mean, you've now basically kind of overcompensated and going the other way, and you've potentially hurt other people to get into school.
Yeah, I've hurt some other people.
Yeah, and so that's definitely not fair. Yeah, I'm a big believer. This is like, you judge these students on their merits. Look, you can take the GPA in there and some of their extracurricular stuff, but look at their ACT or the SAT scores, which thanks to the pandemic, a lot of schools dropped, and I'm not sure how many are basically reinstating that. But that also has kind of given a lot of people probably wouldn't have qualified otherwise. I mean,
I think my daughter told me the other day that, like, she's looked at 30 schools' policy on SAT, and 2 of them still require it for admissions. 2 of 30. So what's the criteria anyway, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the less objective it is, the more malleable it is to be, shaped for one group or the other, right? Another thing, making an objective measure,
Yeah, I mean, I always hated those kinds of tests, but I understand that you need to have some kind of value, some way to measure the student's aptitude and whether or not they are potentially ready for the college experience. Because you leap from high school to college, it's a different game.
A different game, and no one cares. In high school, they want you to make it, right? The school's cheering for you to do well, right? So they throw in a few little extras to get you over the hump. In college, they don't care. They got their money. They don't care what you do. So, that's a whole different thing.
Yeah. So that's, it really, in college, it really relies upon you. You have to be that motivated person to go to class, to study, to take the test, do all those things. Because, they'll tell you when these things are, but your parents aren't there in your dorm room saying, "Oh, by the way, don't forget your test, in tomorrow," or something like that. You have got to do this, and that's how you kind of separate the students. Not all students succeed in college, but when you have virtually no standards, or you're basically saying we have got to take 10% of our admissions have got to be Black, or 5% have got to be Hispanic, or whatever. Regardless of whether or not they've gotten good test scores or whatever, you're not even helping those students. You're throwing them into a situation where they're going to fail. And I don't think.
And even if they don't fail, right? If you're a Black student at Harvard, right? Every other student at Harvard is looking at you and saying affirmative action, right? No one's looking at you and saying, I was smart enough to be here. I actually deserve to be here, right? Right. I mean, you put that stamp on it. They can never be out from under that cloud. That cloud is on them no matter what they do.
Yeah. I mean, race and gender should be out of the equation, right?
Yeah.
It's just that you don't want to have these set asides. And then you're right though. I mean, that's a good point of just that people would be looking. It's like, oh yeah, probably here because of that set aside. Because they have they had to fill their quota. Kind of thing like that. That's just not the way to go.
What a way to go through college, right?
Yeah, that does a lot of good. All right, we're out of time. Let's go ahead and wrap this up, Brian. Last word, final thoughts.
Oh, there's one on here that I do not want to skip, and that was the piece the lady wrote in the Atlantic that Randy Weingarten was commenting on it, saying amnesty, pandemic amnesty for the people who made the choices to lock us down. Okay, when I was in college, I did many term papers on the death penalty. I collected the information. I could just plug it into the different format and write whatever I wanted about the death penalty, right? One of the things about the death penalty is it does not dissuade people from doing violent crimes, right? There's other reasons to do it. It's not necessarily, a reason to abandon the death penalty, but only about 3 or 4% of the criminals that they talk to say, oh, if I would get actually executed for this, I would not have done it, right? I would do it for life in prison, but not execution. Okay, that's a very small percentage of people. This is not that. This is a whole generation of aspiring Nazi bureaucrats on the inside of the system, right? Who are looking at the Rachel Walensky's and Nick Fauci's and the Deborah Birxes of the world and saying, if they get away with this, I can do whatever I want. If they are sent to prison and they are punished appropriately and they are excluded from public life and academic life forevermore, then those people will understand I better not lie and subject my fellow citizens to the suffering that they did, right? These are persuadable people. These are places where severity of the punishment of these people will make us safer in coming generations. And I think they should be punished to the full maximum extent of the law and professional situations they're in.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, don't blame us. And also don't forget to vote Democrat and vote for all our liberals on the school board.
Yeah. No, sir. You go down. And every local official, you go down, right? You the one that told everybody they should be, you're the mask Nazi of your town. You go down. You caused us to suffering when you knew better. So no, you don't get us amnesty. You get punished severely and you get excluded forever.
Yep. All right. I just want to say a couple of things. One thing I wanted to say here too is just that I put this down on the list because on this whole Halloween tragedy in South Korea, and so the only reason I really want to comment on it is because I've been to Itaewon. I mean, that's a huge tourist spot to begin with, and so I can see those crowds. I can understand. I mean, what's happening here? You've got this post-pandemic thing. People are finally coming out, but I have been in alleyways in Itaewon because the alleyways are full of shops, bars, whatever. They are quite narrow, and a lot of them are hilly. A lot of them, start off here and then they go down or whatever. So this was a recipe for disaster. Maybe there should have been more police, a lot of other things. There were definitely way too many people there, and there was just a lot of bad things happened. Unfortunate things happened there at once. But boy, I can just see that anybody in the back starts pushing ahead, especially on any kind of incline in those alleyways. It was not going to end well because there's just no room. I mean, they are so stinking narrow and everything like that. And it's just it was a horrible tragedy. And I my thoughts and prayers go out to those in South Korea for that. But hopefully they'll take a look at that and try to figure out a way to prevent those things from happening in the future. But it is a function partly of the way things are designed too. I mean, like I said, I've been there. Lots of alleyways in Korea. It is a fact of life for them out there. Also, the other thing was, I do want to ask you about your Astros, only because I seem to recall that you said that Philly was not going to be able to hit your pitchers.
Yeah, they hit them pretty good last. The Astros. One of the things that happened is, Justin Verlander is a free agent after this year. And it looks like it is beginning to look like we timed that one just exactly right, because, he has gotten to the end of the season and he's basically lost it. He's been lit up his last 4 starts. So I'm not sure he gets another start. They have him named right now, but I could see that things changing if if we get that far. So, and so he's already said too that he doesn't want to re-sign with Houston. He doesn't, it's too hot for him down there or whatever. So he grew up in Hopewell, Virginia. I say, how much hotter is it than Hopewell, Virginia? But anyway,
if you've been in the DMV, what's a big deal about being in Houston?
Yeah. And so they hit, and McCullers is apparently, he's been sort of hit and miss too. And they got to him, hit 5 home runs off of him last night. There was some complaints about Dusty leaving him in too long. Dusty gets to the end of these things, and he's had a lot of issues getting them across the finish line. So, kind of not surprised. It's kind of what you get with him. You a great regular season and not much of a sad ending. So with Verlander,
I mean, his World Series record is what, 0-6. I mean, he's got
a 7 ERA. I mean,
he's been terrible there. Kind of shades of Clayton Kershaw, but worse.
Yeah,
in postseason. And then Dusty. I mean, I think there are a lot of people rooting for Dusty to get that World Series title, but here you've got a great team now. I mean, look, Philly they're lit. I mean, they're on fire.
Yeah,
they are just mashing the ball. I mean, you serve them up with something hittable, and they're just taking it out of the park overall. Yeah. So this is going to be an interesting series. I mean, this will be Houston has got to win. They've really got to win tonight. I mean, they cannot go down 3-1. But boy, at this point, Dusty's reputation in terms of how he's been seen as a postseason manager. If you don't win with this team, I don't know.
Right. It's after last year, so I don't know. It could be he could be managing for his job. Could be the end.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us again today. Appreciate it. As always, stay safe, stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. And we'll see you again next week. God bless America. And once again, thanks for being with us.